Okay, good morning. Hemshach Ayin Beis, Volume 2. Literally finished page 1193, and we're ready to start top of page 1194. Okay, let's sum up what we learned. So we learned we're middle of the discussion of explaining the story with Eliyahu Hanavi, where they said twice Havayu Elikim, which of course is the context of a Yadaita Hayoim v'hashavesa levavecha ki Hashem hu Elikim, ki Havayu Elikim. B'shamayim emal v'aretz mitachas. So the Havayu Elikim is the key connection here. Saying it twice. The story with Eliyahu began in a negative way. There was the defilement or the destruction of the Mizbeach, Hahadus. Hahadus means disturbed, or you could even say destroyed. And Eliyahu healed it. And when the people saw the miracles that he did, they changed he healed them and brought them from the bad path to positive, to good path through the miracles. And that's when they saw that, they said, Havayu Elikim. So we're explaining how the Mizbeach that Eliyahu healed from its defiled state is the Malchus, which the fire of Malchus is yearning to go upward. So we call that Eish Hashem, Eish Havaya, Eish Hey. I'm sorry, Eish Hey, not Eish Havaya. Eish Hey, seeking to connect to Eish Yud, Isha to Ish. Malchus yearning to go upward. To explain the dark flame of Eish Hashem, we went now into discussion how darkness precedes light. But that's the order of how the world was created. So the Rebbe Rashab explained that at length, or relatively a page here, about everything begins once God wants creation with its tzimtzum, with concealment. And then comes the light. And so everything in life is structured by body and soul. The soul is a form of light. The body is a form of darkness, Ur and Keli. And the goal is that they should join together. And the way they join, as we shall learn soon, is through the Ratzeh of the lower level reaching upward. But he didn't say that yet, spell that out. So right now he discussed these two levels of concealment and revelation, which of course is so much the context of Hadaita Hayoim, day and night, as well as Havayu Elikim, the idea of taking two states, one that's concealed and revealing the divine within it, which is of course the Yichud of Havayu Elikim. So, but the process is, it begins first with a state of concealment, and then you move toward a state of revelation. Okay. We also discussed the difference between the Kelim of Malchus and Kelim of Atzilus, where in the Kelim of Malchus, the divine is more concealed. That's why it's like the words of speech, the Asar Mamoris, the Eisius, the letters of speech. And whereas the containers of Zah, which we're soon going to learn is Eish Yud, as opposed to Malchus Eish Hey, or actually he already said that probably. Did he say Zah and Malchus? He said Malchus, he didn't say Zah directly, but he said Ish, which is Zah. Okay. So that, and whereas the Kelim of Zah, like the letters of thought, which are connected and more sublime. Okay. Now, the last piece we learned is a twofold statement that the Rebbe Rashab is making, twofold explanation. He started with Ze'in Kibriyosha Shalelam Bereisha Chashecha. That when we say first comes darkness and then comes light, one second. He says, Bain, that the explanation of that is in both sense, both in the root and source. Bain b'moker v'sheidah sheyesavos, that when God first desired, in the root of it all, before the tzimtzum, he desired in his shapeless desire, there should be creation, then that caused that there first should be a tzimtzum to conceal the divine energy so there can be the space for creation. That tzimtzum is the level of, it comes together with the reshimu, that trace that is revealed after the tzimtzum is the root of the containers, like I explained, the seeds, the letters, and then comes, that's the root of the containers, then comes the kav. So that's Reisha Chashecha v'Hadar Neher, Erev and Boiker, Vahi Erev, Vahi Boiker. First concealment, and then the revelation of the kav, which manifests in these letters of the Rishima, as I explained, and bring them to life. And radiates inside the chol. But then he said Bain. So on top of 1194, we continue now. He says, you see the Bain that he said, 7 lines from the bottom. He said, Bain b'moker v'sherish yisavos, and ubein lamata b'yisavos hanivraim. So this concept of darkness preceding light is not just in the actual process of creation, it's also in the original source and the root where it all began. Tzimtzum, concealment, dark, light. Now he's going to say the same thing is in the actual process of creation. Bein lamata b'yisavos hanivraim asarim amoris. So before he was talking when God desire to create, so that caused the tzimtzum and then the kav, and all the details he mentioned. And now, lamata b'savos, when the actual creation is happening, in the creation of the nivroim from the asarim amoris. Remember, there's no nivroim yet by the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is just all primordial states of concealment in order for there to be revelation, and it's just the beginning of shaping Ak and the higher worlds. But when you go now into Atzilus, the Protis, and the microcosm of Atzilus, where you have Malchus of Atzilus, there's the Asarim Amoris. Now we're talking about actually creating Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia. You don't hear about Yehi Oyer, Yehi Rakia on those levels yet because it hasn't yet gotten to the stage of actual creation of the details of existence. So it's in a much more, as he call it, Sheirish Shemokar Yisavos. Now we're talking about the Yisavos from the 10 statements, Masarim Amoris, who Gamkin came. It's also in this manner, a first Bereisha Chashech, a first dark and then light. And he's going. So in other words, in the actual process, it's also this manner of first dark and then light. Ukamoi, Maimer Tache Aretz. Like the third, what happened was created in the third day. Tache Aretz, the earth shall sprout growth. Basically, God is giving now the earth. He created heaven and earth, but until now, we don't know what the earth produces. So God now said that this earth should produce plants, growth, everything that grows from earth. Tacha oris. She says, Harizeb kemoshel ba'odam agashmi, sheyemer maimer oisius tache, sheyetzim b'derech er v'keli, shumuhus ha'oisius, sheyetzim b'hevel mamish. Okay. This needs a little explanation. So when God said Tache Aretz, he's saying it's like, for example, a person, a physical person. She'emer maimer esis Tache sheyetzim b'derech er v'keli shumuhus esis sheyetzim b'hevel mamish. Just give me a moment. Let me just read it properly to myself. Okay. What the Rebbe Rashab is saying essentially is that when God said the Sarim Amoris, the 10 statements, so what was first, what happened first? Was it first an air or first a keli? So he's saying that the first thing that happened was God gave earth the power to produce. He says that's a very physical creation. Just like, maybe that's why he's using Tacharas, because Yehi and Yehi are both more sublime, because one is light and one is the heavens. Well, Tacharas is a very physical thing. The earth now has the power to give growth. Before that, it could have very well been that the earth would have been just like a table or a piece of stone. A stone. Stone doesn't have power to sprout any growth. The earth now has a certain vitality that's unique only to earth, that this earth will cause things to grow, whether they'll grow naturally or through planting seeds. So the first thing you have is the chomer of the actual mimer. The first thing is the creation of this power to grow. Within it lies a divine energy and the divinity of it. So he's saying the following, giving an example with a human being, that when a person says the words tache, we say mimer eishis tache. I say it now with my mouth. When I say the word tache, which means to sprout, to cause things to grow. So when I say the word, there's two things happening. There's the actual word that I'm expressing, which is the first thing that you hear. And then there's the the idea, what tache is conveying. Like I spoke at length when we talked about the example of words on a page. When you read the words on a page, the first thing you see are words. Then from the words, you come to understand its concept. So the keli here is the word, and the is the concept that it's conveying. And he's saying the same thing is going to be in the nimshal, in the moral of how God creates. That first comes chomer, and then comes tzura. First comes the object, the keli, which means first dark and then light. And then you discover its deeper meaning. Even though Mo'mayla Lamata, obviously by God, it works the other way around. First, he knows what he wants to convey. The speaker begins with the and then he moves to the keli. But the creation process begins with the keli, and then we're looking for the within it. That's essentially what I believe he's saying here. Why he has to go to that extent, we'll soon discover, but let's see. But let me first read the pshat. So the first Bain was in the Shadish and Makar Yisavas. There the point was first concealment, tzimtzum, reshimu, then comes the kav. Now he's saying in the creation process, you also have it this way. It's interesting. Well, I'll point out a cross-reference in a moment. Let's now read it inside. So when a person says the words tache, we're just repeating what God said. It comes in the form of an Eren Keli. Shumuhusa Asius, Sheyetzim Behevel Mamish. The Keli, let me just see how we read this. Which is Shumuhusa Asius, Sheyetzim Behevel Mamish, Zel Chemer Asius. It says Muhusa Asius, Chemer Asius. 1 second. I'm just taken by the word. First he says Muhus, and then he says Chemer, but then he says afterwards, that's the Chitzena. Okay, let me read it as best as I can. I'm not sure why he says Muhusa Asius. But it seems to be Muhusa Asius is... So when I say the words, as I just said, there's the actual words I use. In this case, tache, which come out behevel mamish, which means they actually come out as tangible letters from hevel, from the cavity, hevel from the breath. So in other words, as we know, when it comes to speech, you need few things. We spoke about this. Remember the hey meitzas hapeh. So you have to have, first of all, you have to have the breath. That comes the hevel ruach, which is the key that carries words out from the mouth. But that would only be shapeless letters. That would be like a flute without any any holes. So you have the 5 gutturals, the 5 ways of expressing ourselves, the 5 different that make up. They are the palate, the lips, the teeth, the throat, and the tongue, and they give shape. So we say gichak, for example, gimel yud chav k. I think gimel yud chav k are throaty letters. So each of the Hebrew letter, each letter has its own so-called channel through which the hevel flows. So the hevel is like when you're blowing through a shofar, that would be the breath. That's the cavity that flows through the cavity. But the breath then goes into the different channels that cause the different shapes and the different sounds, I should say the different sounds to come out.
Yeah.
So what
like
he's saying
his lips.
is shemechusa esis sheyetzim behevel mamish, shezeu chemera esis. These are the actual body of the letters. U'kamashikosa begeres hakedes simin hey. The chitzeniusan hu hahevel hayetzim min halev. That the outer dimension of the letters, which means the keli of the letters, is the hevel, is the breath that comes from the heart, because it's ultimately the heartbeat that affects the lungs and affects the breath. So hevel halev is the cavity in the heart that is causing the breath to come out, and then the breath takes on shape by depending on each sound, depending on the different gutturals I just mentioned. That's the keli. V'rak b'teichon melubash ha'er. And it's only within them, within this keli, within this structure, you have manifest the light, the energy. Shu eir ha'seichel v'amidus. That's the content. That's the intelligence or the emotions that are being communicated through these words. So what do you have? So that's where you have keli and oir. And yeah, so now let's continue the order. The first thing you feel, what's felt first? The chemer, the actual letters in this case, the actual substance. And then afterwards, you understand the seichel, the energy and the intelligence within these words. That's what the Rebbe Rashab says. Now, on the previous page, he also spoke about letters. If you remember the tsuda of the letters and the chemer of the letters. I'm interested to know if it's connected. Anyway, let me conclude here with this. What is it? And this is the meaning that first comes darkness, then comes light. Like for example, when a student, at the time that he listens to the words coming from his teacher, he doesn't yet understand that much the depth of the intelligence that's manifest and conveyed and communicated through these letters. Until and integrated within him, to capture and to fully appreciate. Lamed is also to comprehend the depth of the intention of what the teacher had when he spoke those words. So the first thing a student hears are words, letters, words. Those words contain ideas. But the first thing you come to is first the words, and you don't yet understand it fully. Understanding comes later. So basically, cheshach comes before the concealing part of this communication. Remember here, cheshach doesn't mean utter darkness. Cheshach simply means that it's limited in the flow, that comes first, and then from there you grow to understanding the real intention, the depth of the intention. The ikra emek, and the primary depth of the ideas that the teacher conveyed, Amr Razal tell us, the loikoyim inish adaita derab ba'ad mem shnin, that a person does not come to standing and the knowledge of his teacher until 40 years. So we see right there that the true light within the keli, within the oisius, comes much later. This is also an example. The same as with the letters of the 10 statements that God used to create the world. The bizgalus who are asius. What's revealed when Hashem said Eitzi Aretz Desha, or the other of the 10 statements, what's revealed are the letters. Shemezeh hu esav esamitzias. Those letters are what from that causes the creation of the existent entity. Shu b'chinas cheshach. It's a state of cheshach because it's not, you don't see the full light and the intention within it. You just see the body of the creation. Va'ir, and the energy within it, hu shabai de helama esius, lahoyres acheshach. The air which comes is being conveyed now to existence through these letters. They come through the concealment of the letters to radiate the dark. So in other words, the air is the air within these letters, but they're channeling through the letters. Interesting expression. Very similar to the words he used by the kav, that the kav goes into the oisius. Remember, the oisius are that's at this point light shines through them, and that causes the light shines through the darkness and ultimately illuminates it. So that's what he's saying here. That the shaboy the helamaesis lahiras acheshach. So it's not a separate light that's coming from another place. It's going through. First comes the concealed dark state. It's all right. It's all right. And to radiate the darkness. Okay. So to sum up this whole section, it's a little more dense than usual, especially the language. But to briefly state it all, when it began at the bottom of page 1192 and concluded now at the end of this paragraph at the top of 1194 is the following. If you go back, you'll see he spoke about after he spoke about the dark light and the white light, he said, Ubir inyan eish Hashem, eish yud, eish hey, and eish yud, which is dark light and white light, he starts, Dehine ksiva hi ereva hi baker. He went to the discussion of night and day, dark and light, and explained that everything begins with dark and then light. And that led us into the whole point where he said, we see all creations have these two components, dark and light, which he called soul and body, or body and soul, keli and oir. Whatever level, there's always going to be these two stages. The point here is that in the order of creation, not in the order of intention from above, the order of creation, first is dark and then light. From darkness, we come to light. That's in a summation, everything he said here, just to keep it simple. But there are many details that he discussed here regarding the letters and so on. But that's just to make sure that we have the punchline. That's the punchline. So before we continue, now he's going to go back to Eish Hey and Eish Yud and Malchus. But he made this is what he clarified here, this whole concept of Cheshach. I don't think he's going to answer this issue with Salma. Maybe I have to do that. Okay. But before anybody have any questions, let's start with that. Okay. So then we continue. one moment. V'zeu shenikra midas hamalchus isha. And with this, we're going to understand why midas hamalchus, malchus, is called isha, the feminine, which is made up of two words, eish, hey. Because we say in the pasuk, it says ki bihi baram, in the pasuk in Bereshis, it says, what's the full verse there? Elotel shemayim v'aretz bihi baram. So what's bihi baram? So we learn bihi baram is made up also of two. Behei baram. He created them with hay. So bihi baram is behei baram. Vahei ubchins klolos hahevel shu mokara esius. This is why he was so focusing on the concept of letters. Because letters is Dasara Mamoris and Malchus. And the hay, it says Behei Nivra Elam Haza Behei Bottom, is the letter hay, is the general hevel, the general breath, which is the root of the letters, like we just read, the hevel halev, is the breath that from the heart. That is the source of the letters. Siman Hay that he just referred to, the Eis Hay who mocker gufa esis v'chumr yusan. Maybe that's why he said, okay, that the letter Hay is the source of the physical letters and their substance and their matter. I'm going to just bring a Tanya. I want to see it inside. Just a moment. Okay, Siman Hay. Might as well look inside, see if it helps clarify anything. Okay. Yeah. Okay, see, we really got to look at the Tanya properly. It's a long Tanya. Yeah. Okay, but my memory did serve right. It is what I said. It's that the breath is like a shapeless, it's the root of the sound, but it's still a shapeless sound. And it's the breath, which is a general sound that then travels through the different channels. Like here he uses the example of the teeth. The letters Beis, Vav, Mem, Fe, our teeth are through the teeth. Yeah. Mom, it's literally at length. We can learn it together inside if you want, but I don't know if we need to. Esis emchinis chemer v'tzura anikra primis v'chitzenius. Kamis ha-seichel. Okay. I'm going to need more time to go through this. It's a whole section here, really. But I'll just say this. I think this will suffice to understand what we're learning here. There, the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe goes and explains why the world, the Gemara says, Behei Nivra Elam Hazeh. The world says, Elam Haba Nivra Biyud, with a Yud, and Elam Hazeh is created with a Hey. And it says there because the letter Hey, if you say Hey, is the closest thing to the Hevel, without shape and form. The letter Hey, just Hey, is like breath. So it's the root of all letters that come from the breath. The other letters begin to have more definition, even though Aleph, Ah, but Ah is not Hey. Hey doesn't even have a Ah. Hey is just, so Hey is the closest thing to the breath, and from there originate all the others. So when God, we say Ba'asarim Amaris Nivra Elam, so it all began Behei. In the letters themselves, Hey is the original so-called sound. And then it goes into the details, which are the 10 statements, which in turn will create all of existence. That's what's relevant to our discussion here. So what comes first, from the point of view of of when we look at it, is you see the Hey, you see the sound, nothing else. You don't know the deeper intention, the oyer within it, as he said before. That Alter Rebbe says it as well. That the first thing we see is the chaymer, we see the gashmis of it. So that's what he's going back now to say, that Eish Hey, which is Isha, Malchus, is Behebi Baram, and the Hey is the Mokker, the Hevel, Shu Mokker Esis, like he says in Ageres HaKedesh. Mokker Gufa Esis v'Chumri Yusan. So it all begins with the Hey. These are the containers, and the chemer, relatively speaking, the matter of the higher letters, the higher spiritual letters. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. So that's the Hey. The Hey is the so-called the body of the letters, which begins with the letter Hey. Clear? Good. What's the Oyer? Where's the Oyer here? So the Oyer is going to say that's the Eish. Eish Hey. The Hey is the Keli, and the Eish is the Oyer. Ach bechinas Eish. And now yet, the letter of the fire, Eish, the state of fire, Zeu ha'er bechinas v'hodar nuhura hamislabish bekelim. That's the light that follows the dark, the Keli, and manifests inside the Kelim. So basically, Eish Hey is that the Eish is going inside the Hey, the Keli. And this level is called dark light. This is the flame, or dark flame. This is the flame that's closest to the wick, as it connects to and radiates in the dark state of the Keli. So in other words, it's like the Kav that follows the Tzimtzum, or the Ur that follows the Keli, meaning the Ur that comes within into the Keli. So essentially, it's not Ur Ein Sof like Lifnei Tzimtzum, which precedes the Tzimtzum. And now we're talking about an Ur that relates to and radiates and connects with the state that it's entering into. So if you say a neshama goes into a body, the neshama would be like this Ur that comes into the physical body and it radiates it, but it's still radiating a state that is a darkened state. I don't want to jump yet to that point, but it could be that's what he means, what he meant stated earlier, that this is the light as it relates to darkness, like the Ayin of the Yesh HaNivra. It's Elikus, it's divine, but it's divine as it relates to existence, or relates to the Tzimtzum, or relates to the Kelim, as he's saying here. That's the key thing we need to remember.
Is this the light inside the Kav?
Somebody wanted to ask something? Did I miss something? Somebody wanted to ask something?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I asked
if this Eish Shchora is the light inside the Kav.
The Kav is light. It's not the light inside the Kav. The Kav is a ray of light. So what do you mean by the light inside the Kav? You mean the light of the Kav?
You're answering my question.
Okay, the light of the Kav, he said in the last page, yes, that the light of the Kav follows. It's not just the light of the Kav. There's two ways you can explain it, he said before. One is the light of the Kav that radiates through the Tzimtzum and the Rishimu and the letters. And then there's the Oiris as they go into the Kalim, like he said, the concept as it goes through the Asar Mamoris. So that's also light. So they're both referring to all forms of light that follow a darkened or concealed state, that come to radiate into that state. That's what the Eish Shchora is. Okay?
So what's the difference between the light that's enclosed in the sort of memoris and the Kav? It's all from the Kav, yeah?
Well, as we know, the Kav travels, and it's very different. The Kav right after the Tzimtzum Arishan and the Kav as it comes in Tatzilus is far more diminished. It's only a reflection at that point. So it all depends on what level you're talking about. If you're talking in general terms, light and dark, yeah, the Kav in general, that's what he said. If you remember the Bain and the Bain, that's why I made clear to spell it out. He says that the idea of light preceding darkness preceding light is both in the root of creation, which means in the earliest stages, Tzimtzum and Kav, and in lower stages, when you're already dealing with the Oisius, in Atzilus and Malchus, the Kelim of Malchus, and the within the Keli. Remember the within Dibur. That's the difference. So it's much lower level. He's not calling that the Kav per se, because the Kav usually associates with the overall Pnimi, the immanent energy that is from the highest levels. But later specifically would be more, as God says the words, so that's where we're talking now. Also has the Oyer of the Asar Mamoris and the statements themselves, the words, the letters, and the energy within the letters. So that's how it would be called in lower levels. The energy, the Oyer HaChayis of the Asius, as he said. Just using the words that the Rebbe Rashab is using.
All right. What? Now we've made three divisions here: words, letters, and light. What's the difference between words and letters?
Words and letters is the same thing. A word is made up of letter. The truth is, it should be using the word letters here because he uses Oisius all the time. Letters and words are basically the same thing here. He's not distinguishing. It's letters. Letters are make the words. The word tache is made up of 4 letters. Tov, Dalet, Shin, Aleph. Not distinguishing between letters and words.
All right. It just
the letters, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet begin with the Hey. When I say begin, not the first letter, but the Hey is the Moker, he says, Gufa Asius. That's what God says. That's the Kalim of Malchus, Dibur. Those are the words that God uses. Remember, Dibur is not like Machshava, it's Malchus. So it's separate. And it's more tangible. And that comes first. Within the letters, like the letters of the teacher, the student is not yet fully comprehending its inner oyer. So bottom line is, the Hey represents the Kalim, the Eish represents the light within the Kalim, but it's Eish Shchera because it's darkened, because it's not unfiltered light, it's not undiluted, like light that's not subject to any tzimtzum. It's absolutely an Eish, like he says, which both refers to, here I would say he's referring to Malchus. I wouldn't say it's the Kav per se, even though in broader sense it is. I would say it's more the Oyer in the Kalim of the Oisius, in the Kalim and Oisius of Malchus of the Asar Mamoris. So there's an Oyer and a Kalim. Remember we learned Eir and Keli in all levels. Everything is an Eir and a Keli. We're talking now about the Kelim, the Oisius of the Asar Mamoris, which is the Hay, and Eish Hay is the Eir within those Kelim.
Everything is the Ayin and the Yeshanifra from whatever.
I didn't say that. I just said that as an aside, that it could be that's what he's referring to, but I don't want to say anything conclusive because he doesn't say it here yet. But when we finish the whole idea, I'm sure it'll be easier to see what's what here. Yeah, in a certain way, this is Elikus is coming into existence. So in the broad sense of the term, yes. But the specific levels, you know, he did speak earlier about the Chachmila, Chachmatata, Ayin of Yeshamiti, Ayin of Shanivra. But I don't want to make all the connections until we finish the whole subject matter, because I don't want to jump. You know, we're still in the middle of discussing it. And as I said, I'm trying not to process more than necessary.
Okay. Because it's just coming out a bit disjointed. So
it's because we're in the middle of a subject. That's why.
It's hard to follow them.
When the Rebbe said a mimer, we had to wait till the end of the mimer to fully understand the mimer.
Yeah, but he said
so that's we're in the middle of a mimer now. You know, we're in the middle of a subject matter. So that's life. That's how it is. You just can't learn everything at once. You got to learn as it builds. He's building it up. I believe that I've given the flow here quite clearly. It's very clear. He's talking about Avayu Elikim, when the two types of Avayu Elikim, and he's explaining now the idea of the Mizbeach, which is Eish Hashem, Eish Hey, and what it refers to. So just keep that in context. That's the flow. We're ultimately going to come back to connecting it to Avayu Elikim and Das, and on all levels. But we'll see how it emerges. Okay. For Eifena Oir, and the manner that this Oir, we're talking now the Oir, the Eish Hey, that the Oir is manifesting in the Hey. Malchus. Into the Oir, who Aidesha Mislabish Misalam Ba'esius. The way the Oir radiate is through being enclosed, manifest, and concealed in these letters. Going back to the example with the teacher is using letters in expressing himself. The student receives the letters and has something from it, but the main primary Oir is concealed till even age 40 or 40 years later. So he says, okay, so it's Mislam Ba'esis. And now he's qualifying, as I pointed out a number of times. This does not mean concealment, utter concealment. Yesterday I pointed out that there's, in this world, the Oir, Eliki, the divine energy is completely concealed. Tachtenim, as the Alter Rebbe says, the lowest, the deepest form of concealment. Here, we're not necessarily talking about utter concealment. It's all relative. So he says, and the reflection of the light through the letters, it's also radiating and illuminating the letters. They're not just blind letters. They're not just dark letters. When you hear that even a beginner student is listening to his teacher speak, it's not like he doesn't get anything. So there is a manner of illumination here. The kav, for example, is radiating, but it's through states of concealment because it has to travel through these letters and through these kelim, which are driving and directing the letters, the light, I should say, the energy. This is explaining, this is classic Chassidus explaining the word Eish Shchera. What does it mean, a dark flame? So basically he's saying it's a darkened flame. Through the concealment in the letters, who meir es hacheshech. Interesting addition now. Now this explains a lot of the lines you used before. In other words, it's radiating the darkness, the dark state that was the initial concealment of the container, not by overwhelming surge of light. It's not like, let's say, for example, you have a dark space, and then you suddenly bring in a tremendous torch of fire to illuminate. That's not the process here. The process is as the Oyer goes through the Kalim, through the Isis and the Kalim, that's how it radiates the concealed state. So it's all happening in a very measured way. So in other words, let's go back to the example with teacher and student. It's not the pshat that the student first, the beginner student, hears an idea. In a very minimal way, he just understands the words, the letters. In the letters, from the letters, he's understanding some of the idea. Okay, then you could say, you know what? A little later, the teacher comes and opens up the channels, the gate, the floodgates, and just begins to pour ideas out. No, that's not how it works. It's a step-by-step process. As the student grows and matures, he acclimates himself and is able to assimilate more of the idea, and he grows day by day, week by week, year by year, to the point when he'll be 40 years later, he begin, why can't you jump and just jump to 40 years right away? Because we want it to be inside the Kalim. If you remember, we talked at length about Mamata Lamaila. I even referred you to a chapter that was very vital all the way far back, with the importance of Mamata Lamaila, which we say V'yadaita Ayin is all Mamata Lamaila, from the bottom up. We're not talking here from the top down. From the top down, everything works differently. From the bottom up, you have a Malchus that is yearning. It's Smeya, he said. It's thirsty. It's a Rotze. Why is there a Rotze? Because everything is in a more diminished and concealed state, but it has to be step by step. So even as the Oyer radiates, it's going through the letters. It's not overwhelming them and overriding them, which of course is vital to the bigger theme that we're not looking to overturn and override the Tzimtzum. We're looking to transform the Tzimtzum, or else it wouldn't permeate existence. It wouldn't be a Dira B'Tachtenim. And that is the process of a slow, step-by-step, from the bottom-up process. So it's the letters, or what he calls the cheshech here, the darkened state, the concealed state, that's driving the whole engine here. What does that mean? That the oil comes through those letters, and that's how it radiates. It radiates through the containers, not bypassing them and not overriding them or overwhelming them in the general sense. Obviously, there are moments and times in a person's life and in the year where we have a surge of a Malmaila Lamata gift from above to help us along. But if you're talking about the real process of transformation from within, this is the way it goes, step by step. So basically, there's the hay and there's the eish, but the eish is darkened because the whole eish, the air is working and revealing through concealed channels, basically. Now, as we said earlier, concealment is all relative. You know, the concealment of dibur, the letters of dibur, of speech, is different than the letters of thought. But we're talking here speech, mamoris. We're talking here the level of speech, the kelim of Malchus, the asis of Malchus, yeah. And because, on the other hand, it's a light that radiates this darkened state. That's why it's called dark flame, a dark fire. So now he's explained why it's called Eish Cheda. It's dark fire because on one hand, it's Eish. On the other hand, it's Eish that's completely engaging with and channeling through Cheshach, which he calls the Eisis and Kalim, a state of Cheshach. And if you want to go back to the bottom of page 1192, he said clearly that the guf compared to the neshama is cheshach. On higher levels, it's also cheshach, but it's cheshach in a more subtle form. Yeah. So he's associating right now substance, matter, to darkness, and spirit to an energy to light. So we say energy and matter, or I'm sorry, not energy and matter. Yeah, energy and matter, or spirit and matter, is a form of dark and light and dark, and how they're engaging each other. That's called the dark flame. Okay. Any questions so far right now?
Yeah, please. I didn't. I'm sure you explained it, but I didn't get it. It says Horus Hara Teicha Osius. It's Mayor Gamas Osius. It seems something happened to the Osius. Then that's in the parentheses. Then he says immediately after that, his almas Osius Moir es Achosha. I'm not sure what the parenthetical statement is adding to that idea.
The parenthetical statement is just saying that it's not total concealment. That you are getting some light through the letters. It's not black. It's not totally black and dark. The student is receiving a message through the letters. The question is how much. So it's in a concealed state. It's limited, but it's there. That's all he's saying.
But that's what he says right after the parentheses. He says
no. That's not what he says on the parentheses.
After the parentheses.
After the parentheses, I just explained. No, after the parentheses, he's saying something else.
Oh, okay.
That I just explained that length, that the kav does not override the kalim, that the does not override it. It works through it. So the parentheses is talking about, is there revelation or not? After the parentheses, he's saying that the revelation channels through the letters. Okay.
Okay. I guess.
What's interesting is that it says that the concealment within the letters is what lights up the darkness.
It's not exactly what he says. He says
Literally.
the light that travels through the concealment of the letters is what lights it up. Means through the fact that it's being concealed in the letters, that's how it radiates the dark. That's how it illuminates the dark. Yeah, just instead of being technical, just look at the example of a teacher and a student that he gave. When a student is hearing, even a beginner student is hearing an idea, he hears the basic surface level of the idea through the letters. The letters are giving him something, and slowly he will grow. And the Meir Sacheshech, that concealed the concealment and the darker state where this flame, where this air is radiating, is slowly going to radiate that state, and slowly it will grow to the point where he's able to receive more light.
The mashal he gives
The
is
bottom line is, if there were no oisius, if there were no letters, a student would not be able to receive anything. Then it would be complete concealment. The fact of the matter is, the letters that are coming from the teacher to the student, or in the mashal, or in the nimshal, from God to creation, asar ma'amaris, are both concealed and revealed at the same time. It's revealing something, but on the terms of a structured existence. That's the key thing that he's saying here. Okay?
yeah. No, your mashal is very, very clear. The
It's not even mine, the Rebbe Rashab's mashal.
Fair enough. But Hisalmus Ba'osius, it's not a complete Hisalmus. That's the key. It's partial. And that's what lets in some light, but not too much light.
Exactly. When God created the world, was that revelation or concealment? The answer is both.
Both. Now I got that loud and clear through the yesterday and today. Right?
Yeah. The point is that if you want to dissect the anatomy, the key thing to understand here is that he wants to have a total unity, havayu elikim, unity, and interface between godliness and existence. The only way to do that is to create a relationship between Oyer and Cheshech. There's no way around that. If you want a relationship with a student that's not only on your terms as the teacher, or only on the terms of the student, there has to be a certain mix of conceal and reveal. I'll take it a step further. There's no relationship that doesn't have that. The relationship between spouses, if it to be a balanced, healthy relationship, there's a certain element of giving and restraint. You can't constantly be just flowing. There has to be measure. And that's what maintains the balance. If you want to not annihilate the other, that's the only way. So that's why this is so delicate. And that's why the Rebbe Rashab is so careful in every step of the way, because you want to have something that's not overwhelming, but also not underwhelming. You need to have something. If you don't have any light, then you don't have a relationship either. You need to have something coming, flowing, but also in a way that can be received well. Another classic example is raindrops. Story in the Gemara in Tainus. So there was a drought in Israel, and they were praying for rain. It started pouring. Finally got it start pouring. It was pouring to the point it was drowning. It was flooding the fields. And when flooding the fields is just as destructive as a drought. So then he had to pray again. He had to pray again and say, we can't receive so much goodness. It needs to come down in drops. It's called chesed shebegvuris kshamim. Chesed. What means the drops? So it's rain. If there's no rain, it's a drought. If it's flooding the fields, it's overwhelming and destructive. So you need it to be rain, hashpa, oir, but in drops. Drop by drop, that's absorbed in the ground, in the earth, until more drops come. So it has to be measured. This is the key to everything in life. People love each other. They'll love your children. You can spoil them, or you can starve them. You want to be able to give exactly the amount, not more, not less. Nothing in existence does not have this balance. When you put food in your mouth, what do you think a healthy digestive system is doing? It's taking in the nutrients. It's eliminating the waste. It has to break things down. The blood has to be particularly thick and not too thin and not too thick. There's nothing in existence, whether it's in nature or when we build machines, that has that flow. The regulation of electricity into appliances. Too much, it will blow out the circuits. Too little, there won't be power. So whatever you talk about, communication, writing, reading, love, as I mentioned, relationships, it all comes down to a balance between and keli, or if you wish, concealment and revealing. But remember, concealment does not, as I said, always mean you're talking about like a black hole where it's all dark. It can evolve to that state. So here he's speaking about Malchus is a perfect balance, because Malchus has to create Biyah. Malchus will become the Keser and lead to the next world of creation. So it has to funnel, as we learned, Knesset Yisrael, channel the energy. So there's Eiris, there's Kalim. The Kalim and the Oisius now are more dominant, Asara Maimoris, because you want to have a physical world. So God needs to have a structured world. So you have to have these letters. The letters come first, and within them and through them is channeled the energy. That's the key point being made here. That's Eish Cheda. That's another way of calling it. A name for this is called the dark flame or darkened flame. Okay?
100%.
Good. And now he's going to go back to the Kav. We've been talking about the Kav. This was talking more in Malchus and the Eisias, the letters of the 10 statements. Now he's going to say, V'chein b'chlolus hu b'chinas eira Kav. And same, like he said before, the Bain, and more in general. If you're talking now in general terms, not just the letters of the Sarah Maimoris and Malchus as it creates creation, b'chlolus, the V'chein b'chlolus, in general, hu b'chinas eira Kav. This is the light of the Kav, which is, Kav means a line, a thread and line of light, like a laser beam, or the paintbrush, shulahoyer es acheshech. Because before the Kav, there was a tzimtzum, everything is concealed. Even though they're the letters of the Rishimu that remained, but they're in a concealed state. You don't see them. They're not obvious. They're not yet a structure that we can say is defined, is tangible and so on. Meaning, when I say tangible, I mean to say it's a concealed state. The Kav now enters, like I mentioned with the letters that disappear, but they're there. So now the Kav is coming to radiate this darkened state, the concealment that the Tzimtzum created. It's essentially the stream of consciousness that comes from the teacher after he concealed and covered his brilliance, his infinite brilliance. Now he's going to stream. Now, in lower levels, it's called the Oisius of Asara Maimoris. But Chlolus, he says, it's the Kav. L'hoyeres acheshech, who commission is barley ill. As was explained earlier, the Chlolus inyan eira Kav, who l'hoyeres ha'elems. There we go. The general kav. We're not talking about pnimius kav now. That's the inner intention with the kav. If you remember, that's like a place that's even higher. That talks. We're talking about it, that the general kav is to radiate and illuminate the worlds. Okay, here he's spelling it out clearly. This is the light of mamala kalalmin, imminent, internalized energy, shemislabish be'elamis, that is enclosed and manifests in the worlds, liyes lehem bebchinas er v'chayis, serving them as a force of energy and vitality. Ukamaimer, like the mimer we say in Pasach Eliyahu, which he referred to earlier, Vahu neviu iyu kinishmasa legufa. And this flow, if you remember, he talked there about irrigating the spheres. He says, and this flow is like a soul to the body of existence of the spheres, the kav. Uba, however, this kav is not an independent kav. The kav came through the darkness and of the concealment of the tzimtzum, v'yisalmus b'teich hakelim, and the concealment within the containers, v'yidei zehu meir, and that's how the kav is now radiating. It's radiating through these channels. It's not an independent light. It's a light that's radiating completely. That's what mamala kalam is. The soul radiates through the body. It doesn't bypass the body. It's all tailored internally. It's not like sevav kalalmin, like transcendent light. Okay, let me see how much more here. I'll just read two more lines. So now he's applying this principle that we said before about the letters and the energy within them in Malchus. In general, it's the kav, and this is the level of eish shchera, the dark flame. Mipnei sheklolis. In the bottom he says ha'ir, because the general energy who rak lohir echeshach, because it's the general energy's purpose is only to radiate the dark state. So not only is it there to illuminate the dark, but it also the illumination happens. The way the light is transmitted is through the dafka, specifically through concealment. So there's 2 points here. The kav is coming, the same thing, all light in Mamal Kalam is coming to radiate a concealed state, and it also radiates through the concealed state, meaning through the channels of those letters or the kalim that give it shape. Like an example I gave with a projector of white light, but it's channeling through the film, and now the light coming out on the other side is a light, but it's a light that's completely channeled through the structured kalim or letters that we've been discussing here. So there are 2 points here. That's good to emphasize. Okay, that covers Eish Shchera. From here on, we're going to stop here, but he's going to go now. What is Eish Levena? Then what is white light? If this is dark light or dark flame, what is the white flame?
Eish levono.
Levona. Not Levena? Okay, nice.
Rabbi
Eish
Jacobson,
Levana.
may I say something?
Sure, 1 second. So we're just going to stop here. We're going to stop here, middle of page 1194. Go ahead.
I brought this example, Mashal, before, and we discussed it. But to me, when you talk about everything that you talk about today, this Mashal, it resonates very well. And I don't know if it helps the other ones understand. It's actually, the way to think about it is the Sefer Torah and the Otiot of the Torah and the background of the cloth, as to how we talked about before with the keli, with the chitzoni keli, with the or, pnimius or and chitzoni or. So when you think about a Sefer Torah, all these concepts actually resonate very well within that concept of creation.
Okay, that's good. That works. We're going to talk about, there's the Eish Shchera al Eish Levena, Eish Levena.